The Super Bowl is the annual American football game that determines the champion of the National Football League. The game culminates a season that begins in the previous calendar year, and is the conclusion of the NFL playoffs. The winner receives the Vince Lombardi Trophy. The contest is held in an American city, chosen 3 to 4 years beforehand, usually at warm weather sites or domed stadiums. Since January 1971, the winner of the American Football Conference Championship game has faced the winner of the National Football Conference Championship game in the culmination of the NFL playoffs. Before the 1970 merger between the American Football League and the National Football League, the two leagues met in 4 such contests. The first 2 were marketed as the AFL-NFL World Championship game, but were also casually referred to as the Super Bowl game during the television broadcast. Super Bowl III in January 1969 was the first such game that carried the Super Bowl moniker in official marketing. The names Super Bowl I and Super Bowl II were retroactively applied to the first 2 games. The NFC/NFL leads the AFC/AFL with 29 wins to 27. A total of 20 franchises, including teams that have relocated to another city, have won the Super Bowl. The New England Patriots and Pittsburgh Steelers have won the most Super Bowls with 6 championships, while the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers have 5 wins. The New England Patriots have the most Super Bowl appearances with 11, while the Buffalo Bills have the most consecutive appearances with 4 from 1990 to 1993. The Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots are the only other teams to have at least 3 consecutive appearances. The Denver Broncos and Patriots have each lost a record 5 Super Bowls. The Minnesota Vikings and the Bills have lost 4. The record for consecutive wins is 2 and is shared by 7 franchises: the Green Bay Packers, the Miami Dolphins, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the San Francisco 49ers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Denver Broncos, and the New England Patriots. Among those, Dallas and New England are the only teams to win 3 out of 4 consecutive Super Bowls. The 1972 Dolphins capped off the only perfect season in NFL history with their victory in Super Bowl VII. The only teams with multiple Super Bowl appearances and no losses are the Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both having achieved a Super Bowl record. 4 current NFL teams have never appeared in a Super Bowl, including franchises that have relocated or been renamed: the Cleveland Browns, Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Houston Texans, though both the Browns and Lions had won NFL championship games prior to the creation of the Super Bowl in the 1966 season. Origin. For 4 decades after its 1920 inception, the NFL successfully fended off several rival leagues. In 1960, the NFL encountered its most serious competitor when the American Football League was formed. The AFL vied with the NFL for players and fans. The original bowl game was the Rose Bowl game in Pasadena, California, which was first played in 1902 as the Tournament East-West football game as part of the Pasadena Tournament of Roses and moved to the new Rose Bowl Stadium in 1923. The stadium got its name from the fact that the game played there was part of the Tournament of Roses and that it was shaped like a bowl, much like the Yale Bowl in New Haven, Connecticut. The Tournament of Roses football game eventually came to be known as the Rose Bowl game. Exploiting the Rose Bowl game's popularity, post-season college football contests were created for Miami, New Orleans, and El Paso in 1935, and for Dallas in 1937. By the time the first Super Bowl was played, the term bowl for any major American football game was well established. After the American Football League's inaugural season, AFL Commissioner Joe Foss sent an invitation to the NFL on January 14, 1961, to schedule a World Playoff game between the two leagues' champions, beginning with the upcoming 1961 season. The first World Playoff game would have, if actually played, matched up the Houston Oilers versus the Green Bay Packers. It took a half dozen more seasons for this idea to become a reality. In the mid-1960s, Lamar Hunt, owner of the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs, first used the term Super Bowl to refer to the AFL-NFL championship game in the merger meetings. Hunt later said the name was likely in his head because his children had been playing with a Super Bowl toy. A vintage example of the ball is on display at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. In a July 25, 1966, letter to NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle, Hunt wrote, "I have kiddingly called it the Super Bowl, which obviously can be improved upon." The league's owners chose the name AFL-NFL Championship Game, but in July 1966 the Kansas City Star quoted Hunt in discussing the Super Bowl, "That's my term for the championship game between the two leagues," and the media immediately began using the term. Although the league stated in 1967 that not many people like it, asking for suggestions and considering alternatives such as Merger Bowl and the game, the Associated Press reported that Super Bowl grew and grew and grew until it reached the point that there was Super Week, Super Sunday, Super Teams, Super Players, ad infinitum. Super Bowl became official beginning with the third annual game. Roman numerals are used to identify each Super Bowl, rather than the year in which it is held, since the fifth edition, in January 1971. The sole exception to this naming convention tradition occurred with Super Bowl 50, which was played on February 7, 2016, following the 2015 regular season, and the following year, the nomenclature returned to Roman numerals for Super Bowl LE, following the 2016 regular season. After the NFL's Green Bay Packers won the first two Super Bowls, some team owners feared for the future of the merger. At the time, many doubted the competitiveness of AFL teams compared with their NFL counterparts, though that perception changed when the AFL's New York Jets defeated the NFL's Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III in Miami. 1 year later, the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs defeated the NFL's Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV in New Orleans, which was the final AFL-NFL World Championship game played before the merger. Beginning with the 1970 season, the NFL realigned into two conferences. The former AFL teams plus 3 NFL teams would constitute the American Football Conference, while the remaining NFL clubs would form the National Football Conference. The champions of the two conferences would play each other in the Super Bowl. The winning team receives the Vince Lombardi Trophy, named after the coach of the Green Bay Packers, who won the first two Super Bowl games and 3 of the 5 preceding NFL championships in 1961, 1962, and 1965. Following Lombardi's death in September 1970, the trophy was named after him. The first trophy awarded under the new name was presented to the Baltimore Colts following their win in Super Bowl V in Miami. The coin toss was usually presented by a former football player or a special guest to recognize their community involvement or significance. Pre-game ceremonies. The pre-game ceremonies usually go in the following order. Presentation of the most valuable players, occurred every 10 years since 1986. Lift every voice and sing. Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year Award presentation. America the Beautiful. Presentation of the colors. The Star-Spangled Banner followed by flyover. Coin toss. Date. The Super Bowl is played on the second Sunday in February. The current NFL schedule begins on the weekend immediately after Labor Day. That weekend is the first of an 18-week regular season, followed by 3 weeks of playoff games and 1 week for the Pro Bowl. The Super Bowl is contested the week after the Pro Bowl. This schedule has been in effect since an 18th week were added to the NFL schedule for the 2021 season, with Super Bowl LVI on February 13, 2022, the first to be played under this format. The Super Bowl was held in January from its inception until 2002, when the week of games following the September 11 attacks were postponed and rescheduled, extending the season by a week and causing Super Bowl XXXVI to be played on February 3. Beginning with Super Bowl XXXVII in 2004, the Super Bowl was scheduled for the first Sunday in February until the schedule expansion of the 2021 season moved the game to the second Sunday. Game history. The New England Patriots and Pittsburgh Steelers are tied with a record 6 Super Bowl wins. The Dallas Cowboys and San Francisco 49ers have 5 victories each, while the Packers and New York Giants have 4. 14 other NFL franchises have won at least one Super Bowl. The Patriots own the record for most Super Bowl appearances. The Cowboys, Steelers, and Denver Broncos are tied for second with 8 appearances apiece, reaching that milestone in this respective order. Bill Belichick owns the record for the most Super Bowl wins and appearances by an individual. Tom Brady has the most Super Bowl starts and wins as a player, while Charles Haley has the second most wins among players. 8 teams have appeared in Super Bowl games without a win. The Minnesota Vikings were the first team to appear 4 times without a win, while the Buffalo Bills played in a record 4 consecutive Super Bowls, losing in each. The Patriots and Broncos are tied for the most Super Bowl losses. The Cleveland Browns, Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, and Jacksonville Jaguars are the 4 teams to have never appeared in a Super Bowl, although the Browns and Lions both won NFL championships before the Super Bowl era. The Jaguars, who began play in 1995, and the Texans, who began play in 2002, are among the youngest franchises in the league. 1960s. Early history and Packers dominance. The Packers won the first 2 AFL-NFL World Championship games, later renamed Super Bowls, defeating the Kansas City Chiefs and Oakland Raiders following the 1966 and 1967 seasons, respectively. The Packers were led by quarterback Bart Starr, who was named the most valuable player for both games. These 2 championships, coupled with the Packers' NFL championships in 1961, 1962, and 1965, amount to the most successful stretch in NFL history, 5 championships in 7 years, and the second three-peat in NFL history. The Packers are the only team to three-peat, as they also accomplished the feat in the pre-playoff era. The first playoff game in the NFL was in 1932. In Super Bowl III, the AFL's New York Jets defeated the 19-point favorite Baltimore Colts of the NFL, 16-7. The Jets were led by quarterback Joe Namath, who had famously guaranteed a Jets win before the game, and former Colts head coach Wee Bubunk, and their victory proved that the AFL was the NFL's competitive equal. This was reinforced the following year when the Chiefs defeated the NFL's Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV. 1970s, dominant franchises. After the AFL-NFL merger was completed in 1970, 3 franchises, the Cowboys, Miami Dolphins, and Steelers, would go on to dominate the 1970s, winning a combined 8 Super Bowls in the decade. The Baltimore Colts, now a member of the AFC, would start the decade by defeating the Cowboys in Super Bowl V, a game which is notable as being the only Super Bowl to date in which a player from the losing team won the Super Bowl MVP. Beginning with this Super Bowl, all Super Bowls have served as the NFL's championship game. The Cowboys, coming back from a loss the previous season, won Super Bowl VI over the Dolphins. However, this would be the Dolphins' final loss for over a year, as the next year, the Dolphins would go 14-0 in the regular season and eventually win all their playoff games, capped off with a 14-7 victory in Super Bowl VII, becoming the first and only team to finish an entire perfect regular and postseason. The Dolphins would repeat as league champions by winning Super Bowl VIII a year later. In the late 1970s, the Steelers became the first NFL dynasty of the post-merger era by winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. They were led by head coach Chuck Noll, the play of offensive stars Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, and Mike Webster, and their dominant steel curtain defense, led by Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Ernie Holmes, Mel Blount, Jack Ham, and Jack Lambert. Many of the team's key players were selected in the 1974 draft, in which Pittsburgh selected 4 future Hall of Famers, the most for any team in any sport in a single draft. A 5th player, Donnie Shell, was signed by Pittsburgh after going unselected in the 1974 NFL Draft. He too was later enshrined in the Hall of Fame. The Steelers were the first team to win 3 and then 4 Super Bowls and appeared in 6 AFC Championship games during the decade, making the playoffs in 8 straight seasons. Pittsburgh still remains the only team to win back-to-back Super Bowls twice and 4 Super Bowls in a 6-year period. The Steelers' 1970s dynasty was interrupted only by the Raiders' first Super Bowl win in Super Bowl XI and the Cowboys' second Super Bowl win in Super Bowl XII. Conversely, the Vikings, with their Purple People Eaters defense, were the only other team to appear in multiple Super Bowls during the decade but failed to win each one. 1981–1996, the NFC's winning streak. In the 1980s and 1990s, the tables turned for the AFC, as the NFC dominated the Super Bowls of the new decade and most of those in the 1990s. The NFC won 16 of the 20 Super Bowls during these 2 decades, including 13 straight from Super Bowl XIX to Super Bowl XXXI. The most successful team of the 1980s was the 4-9 ERS, which featured the West Coast Offensive Hall of Fame head coach Bill Walsh. This offense was led by 3-time Super Bowl MVP and Hall of Fame quarterback Joe Montana, Super Bowl MVP and Hall of Fame wide receiver Jerry Rice, running back Roger Craig, and Hall of Fame defensive safety/cornerback Ronnie Lott. Under their leadership, the 4-9 ERS won 4 Super Bowls in the decade and made 9 playoff appearances between 1981 and 1990, including 8 division championships, becoming the second dynasty of the post-merger NFL. The 1984 San Francisco 4-9 ERS were the first team to achieve an 18-1 record, doing so under Walsh. The 1989 San Francisco 4-9 ERS, under first-year head coach George Seifert, posted the most lopsided victory in Super Bowl history, defeating the Denver Broncos by a score of 55-10 in Super Bowl XXIV. The 1980s also produced the 1985 Chicago Bears, who posted an 18-1 record under head coach Mike Ditka, quarterback Jim McMahon, and Hall of Fame running back Walter Payton. Their team won Super Bowl XX in dominant fashion. The Washington Redskins and New York Giants were also top teams of this period. Washington won Super Bowls XVII, XXII, and XXVI. The Giants claimed Super Bowls XXI and XXV. Both teams won multiple Super Bowls with different starting quarterbacks. Washington won with Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, and Mark Ripien, and the Giants with Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler. As in the 1970s, the Raiders were the only AFC team to interrupt the Super Bowl dominance of NFC teams. They won Super Bowls 15 and 18. Conversely, the Cincinnati Bengals, Dolphins, and Broncos made multiple Super Bowls in the 1980s without winning one. Following several seasons with poor records in the 1980s, the Cowboys rose back to prominence in the 1990s. During this decade, the Cowboys made postseason appearances every year except for the seasons of 1990 and 1997. From 1992 to 1996, the Cowboys won their division championship each year. In this same period, the Buffalo Bills had made their mark, reaching the Super Bowl for a record 4 consecutive years, only to lose all 4. After Super Bowl championships by division rivals New York and Washington, the Cowboys won 3 of the next 4 Super Bowls, led by quarterback Troy Aikman, running back Emmitt Smith, and wide receiver Michael Irvin. All 3 of these players went to the Hall of Fame. The Cowboys' streak was interrupted by the 4-9 ERS, who were the first team to win their league-leading 5th title overall with Super Bowl XXIX, with a dominant performance featuring the Super Bowl MVP and Hall of Fame quarterback Steve Young, Hall of Fame wide receiver Jerry Rice, and Hall of Fame cornerback Deion Sanders. However, the Cowboys' victory in Super Bowl XXX the next year also gave them 5 titles overall, and they did so with Sanders after he won the Super Bowl the previous year. With the 4-9 ERS, the NFC's winning streak was continued by the Packers, led by Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre, won Super Bowl XXXI, their first championship since Super Bowl II in 1968. The Patriots made their maiden Super Bowl appearances in XX and XXXI but lost both times. However, the turn of the century would soon bring hope and glory to the franchise. 1997–2009, AFC resurgence and the rise of the Patriots. Super Bowl XXXII saw quarterback John Elway and running back Terrell Davis lead the Denver Broncos to an upset victory over the defending champion Packers, snapping the NFC's 13-year winning streak. The following year, the Broncos defeated the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl XXXII, Elway's 5th Super Bowl appearance, his 2nd NFL championship, and his final NFL game. The back-to-back victories heralded a change in momentum in which AFC teams would win 9 out of 12 Super Bowls. In the years between 1995 and 2018, 5 teams, the Steelers, Patriots, Broncos, Baltimore Ravens, and Indianapolis Colts, accounted for 22 of the 24 AFC Super Bowl appearances, with those same teams often meeting each other earlier in the playoffs. In contrast, the NFC saw a different representative in the Super Bowl every season from 2001 through 2010. The New England Patriots became the dominant team throughout the early 2000s, winning the championship 3 out of 4 years early in the decade. They would become only the 2nd team in the history of the NFL to do so. In Super Bowl XXXVI, first-year starting quarterback Tom Brady led his team to a 2017 upset victory over the St. Louis Rams, who 2 seasons earlier won Super Bowl XXXIV. Brady would go on to win the MVP award for this game. The Patriots also won Super Bowls XXXVIII and XXXIX, defeating the Carolina Panthers and the Philadelphia Eagles respectively. This 4-year stretch of Patriot dominance was interrupted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' 48-21 Super Bowl XXXVII victory over the Oakland Raiders. The Steelers and Colts continued the era of AFC dominance by winning Super Bowls XL and XLI in 2005-06 and 2006-07, respectively, defeating the Seattle Seahawks and Chicago Bears. In the 2007 season, the Patriots became the 4th team in NFL history to have a perfect unbeaten and untied regular season record, the 2nd in the Super Bowl era after the 1972 Miami Dolphins, and the first to finish 16-0. They easily marched through the AFC playoffs and were heavy favorites in Super Bowl XLII. However, they lost that game to Eli Manning and the New York Giants 17-14. Leaving the Patriots' 2007 record at 18-1. The following season, the Steelers logged their record 6th Super Bowl title in a 27-23, final-minute victory against the Arizona Cardinals. The 2009 season saw the New Orleans Saints defeat the Indianapolis Colts in Super Bowl XLIV by a score of 31-17 to take home their first championship. With this victory, the Saints joined the New York Jets as the only teams to have won in their sole Super Bowl appearance, a distinction the Ravens also enjoyed in winning Super Bowl XXXV after the 2000 season and the Buccaneers in 2002. 2010s, Patriot reign, parity in the NFC. In the AFC, this era was dominated by the Patriots, with the only four other teams to represent the conference being the Steelers, Ravens, Broncos, and Chiefs. The Patriots had tied a record with the 1970s Dallas Cowboys for most Super Bowl appearances in a decade with 5 appearances. The Patriots also had 4 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years, and were 1 win away from 3 consecutive Super Bowl titles between 2016-2018. With 8 consecutive AFC Championship appearances spanning 2011-2018, the Patriots were 3 wins away from 8 Super Bowl appearances in the 2010s decade. The Super Bowls of the 2000s and 2010s are notable for the performances of several of the participating quarterbacks, especially on the AFC side in repeated appearances by the same teams and players. In particular, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, or Peyton Manning appeared as the AFC team's quarterback in all but 2 of the Super Bowls from 2001 through 2018. Conversely, the only NFC teams to make the Super Bowl multiple times with the same quarterback in this era were the Seahawks, led by quarterback Russell Wilson, and the Giants, led by quarterback Eli Manning. One of these teams was featured in the culmination of the 2010 season, Super Bowl XLV, which brought the Packers their 4th Super Bowl victory and record 13th NFL championship overall with the defeat of the Steelers in February 2011. This became Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl victory so far. The following year, in Super Bowl XLVI, the Patriots made their first appearance of the decade, a position where they would become a mainstay. The Patriots, however, lost to the Eli Manning-led Giants, 21-17, who had beaten the Patriots 4 years before. This was the Giants' 4th Super Bowl victory. In Super Bowl XLVI, the NFC's 4-9 ERS were defeated by the Ravens 34-31. The game had been dubbed as the Harbaugh Bowl in the weeks leading up to the game, due to the fact that the coaches of the 2 teams, John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh, are brothers. During the 3rd quarter, the Ravens had a commanding 28-6 lead. However, there was a blackout in New Orleans, where the game was being played. The game was delayed for 34 minutes, and after play resumed, San Francisco stormed back with 17 straight points but still lost. Super Bowl XLVIII, played at New Jersey's MetLife Stadium in February 2014, was the first Super Bowl held outdoors in a cold weather environment. The Seahawks won their first NFL title with a 43-8 defeat of the Broncos, in a highly touted matchup that pitted Seattle's top-ranked defense against a Peyton Manning-led Denver offense that had broken the NFL's single-season scoring record. In Super Bowl XLIX, the Patriots beat the defending Super Bowl champions, the Seahawks, by a score of 28-24. Down by 10, the Patriots mounted a late 4th quarter comeback to win the game with Tom Brady scoring 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter. In a key play in the final seconds of the game, then rookie free agent Malcolm Butler would intercept a pass by Russell Wilson at the 1-yard line, allowing the Patriots to run out the clock and end the game. Tom Brady was awarded his 3rd Super Bowl MVP, tying Joe Montana for the most Super Bowl MVP awards. In Super Bowl 50, the first Super Bowl to be branded with Arabic numerals, the Broncos, led by the league's top-ranked defense, defeated the Panthers, who had the league's top-ranked offense, in what became the final game of quarterback Peyton Manning's career. Von Miller dominated, totaling 2.5 sacks and forcing 2 Cam Newton fumbles, both fumbles leading to Broncos touchdowns. In Super Bowl LI, the first Super Bowl to end in overtime, the Atlanta Falcons led 28-3 late in the 3rd quarter. However, they squandered the lead as the Patriots would tie the game 28-28 on back-to-back touchdowns and 2-point conversions. The Falcons lost to the Patriots 34-28 in overtime. This 25-point deficit would be the largest comeback win for any team in a Super Bowl, breaking the previous of a 10-point deficit to come back and win. The Patriots never held the lead until the game-winning touchdown in overtime. Tom Brady was awarded his record fourth Super Bowl MVP and fifth win as a Super Bowl champion, throwing a then-record 466 yards for 43 completions. In Super Bowl LI, the Philadelphia Eagles defeated the defending champion Patriots 41-33, ending a 57-year championship drought for the franchise. Nick Foles won the Super Bowl MVP. The Patriots totaled 613 yards in defeat, with Tom Brady breaking his previous Super Bowl record of 466 passing yards with an all-time playoff record 505 passing yards in the high-scoring game, while the Eagles would gain 538 yards in victory. The Patriots' 33 points was the highest losing score in Super Bowl history. The combined total of 1,151 yards of offense for both teams broke an NFL record that had stood for nearly 7 decades. It was the Eagles' third Super Bowl appearance, and their first win in franchise history. With the Eagles' victory, the NFC East became the first division to have each team win at least one Super Bowl. While Super Bowl LI produced the second highest scoring Super Bowl, the following year's Super Bowl LII became the lowest scoring Super Bowl. The Patriots defeated the Los Angeles Rams, 13-3. Tom Brady would receive a record sixth Super Bowl championship, the most of any player in NFL history, surpassing his tie with Charles Haley for 5 wins. Brady would also become the oldest player to ever win a Super Bowl at age 41, while Bill Belichick would be the oldest coach to ever win a Super Bowl at age 66. Wide receiver Julian Edelman was named Super Bowl MVP. In Super Bowl LIV, the Chiefs defeated the 49ers in a comeback, 31-20, for their first Super Bowl title in 50 years. This victory marked the first time since 1991 that the NFC did not have more Super Bowl victories than the AFC. Notable was the absence of the Patriots, who after making it to the Super Bowl the last 3 years and winning 2 of them, had lost in the wild card round of the playoffs, being bested by the Tennessee Titans 2013. 2020s. In Super Bowl LV, which took place in Tampa, Florida, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defeated the Chiefs 31-9. No player on the Buccaneers who scored points was on the Buccaneers roster the previous season. This marked a record 7th Super Bowl victory for Tom Brady, also more than any individual NFL franchise, and who would also break his own record for the oldest quarterback to win a championship at 43 years old. Tampa Bay head coach Bruce Arians would also break Bill Belichick's record for oldest head coach to win a championship at 68. Super Bowl LV also marked the first time in the history of the modern league that a host city's professional football franchise got to play in a Super Bowl that was hosted in their home stadium. In Super Bowl LVI, which took place in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Rams defeated the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20. This marked the second time a team won in their home stadium. Super Bowl LVII will be held at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Television coverage and ratings. The Super Bowl is one of the most watched annual sporting events in the world, with viewership overwhelmingly domestic. The only other annual event that gathers more viewers is the UEFA Champions League final. For many years, the Super Bowl has possessed a large US and global television viewership, and it is often the most watched United States originating television program of the year. The game tends to have a high Nielsen television rating, which is usually around a 40 rating and 60 shares. This means that, on average, more than 100 million people from the United States alone are tuned into the Super Bowl at any given moment. In press releases preceding the game, the NFL has claimed that the upcoming Super Bowl will have a potential worldwide audience of around 1 billion people in over 200 countries. However, this figure refers to the number of people able to watch the game, not the number of people who will actually be watching. Regardless, the statements have been frequently misinterpreted in the media as referring to the latter figure, leading to a misperception about the game's actual global audience. The New York-based media research firm Initiative measured the global audience for the Super Bowl XXXIX at 93 million people, with 98% of that figure being viewers in North America, which meant roughly 2 million people outside North America watched the Super Bowl that year. Super Bowl XLIX holds the record for average number of U.S. viewers, with 114.4 million, making the game the most viewed television broadcast of any kind in American history. The halftime show set a record with 118.5 million viewers tuning in. Super Bowl XLIX peaked at 120.8 million viewers. The game set a record for total viewers for the fifth time in 6 years. The highest rated game according to Nielsen was Super Bowl XVI in 1982, which was watched in 49.1% of households, or 40,020,000 households at the time. Ratings for that game, a San Francisco victory over Cincinnati, may have been aided by a large blizzard that had affected much of the northeastern United States on game day, leaving residents to stay at home more than usual. Super Bowl XVI still ranks fourth on Nielsen's list of top-rated programs of all time, with 3 other Super Bowls in the top 10. Famous Super Bowl commercials include the 1984 introduction of Apple's Macintosh computer, the Budweiser Bud Bowl campaign, and the .com ads aired during Super Bowl XXXIV. As the television ratings of the Super Bowl have steadily increased over the years, commercial prices have also increased, with advertisers paying as much as $7 million for a 30-second spot during Super Bowl LVI in 2022. A segment of the audience tunes into the Super Bowl solely to view commercials. In 2010, Nielsen reported that 51% of Super Bowl viewers tune in for the commercials. Since 1991, the Super Bowl has begun between 6:19 and 6:40 p.m. EST, so that most of the game is played during the prime time hours on the East Coast. U.S. television rights. Throughout most of its history, the Super Bowl has been rotated annually between the same American television networks that broadcast the NFL's regular season and postseason games. Super Bowl I, played in 1967, is the only Super Bowl to have been broadcast in the United States by 2 networks simultaneously. At the time, NBC held the rights to nationally televise AFL games while CBS had the rights to broadcast NFL games. Both networks were allowed to cover the game, and each network used its own announcers, but NBC was only allowed to use the CBS feed instead of producing its own. Beginning with Super Bowl II, NBC televised the game in even years and CBS in odd years. This annual rotation between the 2 networks continued through the 1970 AFL-NFL merger, when NBC was given the rights to televise AFC games and CBS winning the rights to broadcast NFC games. Although ABC began broadcasting Monday Night Football in 1970, it was not added to the Super Bowl rotation until Super Bowl XIX, played in 1985. ABC, CBS, and NBC then continued to rotate the Super Bowl until 1994, when Fox replaced CBS as the NFC broadcaster. CBS then took NBC's place in the rotation after the former replaced the later as the AFC broadcaster in 1998. As a result of new contracts signed in 2006, with NBC taking over Sunday Night Football from ESPN, and Monday Night Football moving from ABC to ESPN, NBC took ABC's place in the Super Bowl rotation. The rotation between CBS, Fox, and NBC will continue until the new contracts that will take effect for the first time with Super Bowl LIX, allowing ABC to return and starting a 4-network rotation. The NFL has broken the traditional broadcasting rotation if it can be used to bolster other major sporting events a network airs afterwards. For example, CBS was given Super Bowl XXVI after it won the rights to air the 1992 Winter Olympics, with NBC subsequently airing Super Bowl XXVII and Super Bowl XXVIII in consecutive years. Likewise, NBC aired Super Bowl LVI instead of CBS during the 2022 Winter Olympics, which were also aired by NBC. CBS received Super Bowl LV in return. Under the 4-network rotation that will take effect beginning in 2024, the league will award NBC the Super Bowl during Winter Olympic years. The first 6 Super Bowls were blacked out in the television markets of the host cities, due to league restrictions then in place. Super Bowl VII was telecast in Los Angeles on an experimental basis after all tickets were sold 10 days before the game. Game analyst John Madden is the only person to broadcast a Super Bowl for each of the 4 networks that have televised the game. Note: years listed are the year the game was actually played rather than what NFL season it is considered to have been. The current TV contract with the networks expires after the 2022 season. Under the deal, the Super Bowl is currently rotated annually between CBS, Fox, and NBC in that order. ABC will return to the rotation in the upcoming contract, which is scheduled to take effect at the start of the 2023 season. The first Super Bowl was simultaneously broadcast by CBS and NBC, with each network using the same video feed, but providing its own commentary. Lead-out programming. The Super Bowl provides an extremely strong lead-in to programming following it on the same channel, the effects of which can last for several hours. For instance, in discussing the ratings of a local TV station, Buffalo television critic Alan Pergament noted that following Super Bowl LIX, which aired on CBS, a paid program that ran on CBS 4 at 2:30 in the morning had a 1.3 rating. That's higher than some CW primetime shows get on WNLO-TV, Channel 4's sister station. Because of this strong coattail effect, the network that airs the Super Bowl typically takes advantage of the large audience to air an episode of a hit series or to premiere the pilot of a promising new one in the lead-out slot, which immediately follows the Super Bowl and post-game coverage. Entertainment. Initially, it was sort of a novelty and so it didn't quite feel right. But it was just like, this is the year. Bands of our generation, you can sort of be seen on a stage like this or, like, not seen. There's not a lot of middle places. It is a tremendous venue. Early Super Bowls featured a halftime show consisting of marching bands from local colleges or high schools, but as the popularity of the game increased, a trend where popular singers and musicians performed during its pre-game ceremonies and the halftime show, or simply sang the national anthem of the United States or America the Beautiful emerged. Unlike regular season or playoff games, 30 minutes are allocated for the Super Bowl halftime. After a special live episode of the Fox sketch comedy series In Living Color caused a drop in viewership for the Super Bowl XXVI halftime show, the NFL sought to increase the Super Bowl's audience by hiring A-list talent to perform. They approached Michael Jackson, whose performance the following year drew higher figures than the game itself. Another notable performance came during Super Bowl XXXVI in 2002, when U2 performed, during their third song, Where the Streets Have No Name. The band played under a large projection screen which scrolled through names of the victims of the September 11 attacks. For many years, Whitney Houston's performance of the national anthem at Super Bowl XXV in 1991, during the Gulf War, had long been regarded as one of the best renditions of the anthem in history. Before Super Bowl LIX, soprano Renee Fleming became the first opera singer to perform the anthem. The halftime show of Super Bowl XXXVIII attracted controversy, following an incident in which Justin Timberlake removed a piece of Janet Jackson's top, briefly exposing one of her breasts before the broadcast quickly cut away from the shot. The incident led to fines being issued by the FCC, and MTV being banned by the NFL from producing the Super Bowl halftime show in the future. In an effort to prevent a repeat of the incident, the NFL held a moratorium on Super Bowl halftime shows featuring pop performers, and instead invited a single, headlining veteran act, such as Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, The Who, Prince, and Bruce Springsteen. This practice ended at Super Bowl XLV, which returned to using current pop acts such as the Black Eyed Peas, Katy Perry, and Lady Gaga. Excluding Super Bowl XXXIX, the famous "I'm Going to Disney World" advertising campaign took place in every Super Bowl since Super Bowl XXI, when quarterback Phil Simms from the Giants became the first player to say the tagline. Venues. As of Super Bowl LVI, 29 of 56 Super Bowls have been played in 3 metropolitan areas: the Greater Miami area, New Orleans, and the Greater Los Angeles area. No market or region without an active NFL franchise has ever hosted a Super Bowl, and the presence of an NFL team in a market or region is now a de jure requirement for bidding on the game. For instance, while Los Angeles had been a 7-time host city, with its most recent being Super Bowl XXVII in 1993, it did not host one from the departure of both its NFL teams in 1995 until the Rams and the Chargers subsequently came back to Los Angeles in 2016 and 2017 respectively. The Louisiana Superdome has hosted 7 Super Bowls, the most of any venue, with an 8th Super Bowl scheduled to take place in the 2024-25 season. The Orange Bowl was the only AFL stadium to host a Super Bowl and the only stadium to host consecutive Super Bowls, hosting Super Bowls 2 and 3. 7 Super Bowls have been held in a stadium other than the one the NFL team in that city was using at the time, a situation that has not arisen after Super Bowl XXVII's host stadium was selected on March 19, 1991. This was as the winning market was previously not required to host the Super Bowl in the same stadium that its NFL team used, if the stadium in which the Super Bowl was held was perceived to be a better stadium for a large high-profile event than the existing NFL home stadium in the same city. For example, Los Angeles's last 5 Super Bowls were all played at the Rose Bowl, which has never been used by any NFL franchise outside of the Super Bowl. Besides the Rose Bowl, the only other Super Bowl venues that were not the home stadium to NFL teams at the time were Rice Stadium and Stanford Stadium. Starting with the selection of the Super Bowl XXVII venue on May 23, 1990, the league has given preference in awarding the Super Bowl to brand new or recently renovated NFL stadiums, alongside a trend of teams demanding public money or relocating to play in new stadiums. To date, only 2 teams have qualified for a Super Bowl at their home stadiums: the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who won Super Bowl LV hosted at Raymond James Stadium, and the 2021 Los Angeles Rams the following season, who won Super Bowl LVI at SoFi Stadium. Before that, the closest any team had come to accomplishing this feat were the 2017 Minnesota Vikings, who reached the NFC Championship game but lost to the Eagles. In that instance, US Bank Stadium became the first Super Bowl host stadium to also host a divisional playoff game in the same season. All previous times that the Super Bowl host stadium hosted another playoff game in the same postseason were all wild-card games. 2 teams have played the Super Bowl in their home market but at a different venue than their home stadium: the Los Angeles Rams, who lost Super Bowl 14 in the Rose Bowl instead of Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, and the 49ers, who won Super Bowl 19 in Stanford Stadium instead of Candlestick Park. during a time when the league often picked a stadium that was not home to an NFL team to host the Super Bowl. Traditionally, the NFL does not award Super Bowls to stadiums that are located in climates with an expected average daily temperature less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit on game day unless the field can be completely covered by a fixed or retractable roof. 6 Super Bowls have been played in northern cities, 2 in the Detroit area: Super Bowl 16 at Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan, and Super Bowl XL at Ford Field in Detroit. 2 in Minneapolis: Super Bowl XXVI at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome and Super Bowl LE at the U.S. Bank Stadium, 1 in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium for Super Bowl XLVI, and 1 in the New York area: Super Bowl SLE at MetLife Stadium. Only MetLife Stadium did not have a roof, but it was still picked as the host stadium for Super Bowl SLE in an apparent waiver of the warm climate rule, with a contingency plan to reschedule the game in the event of heavy snowfall. MetLife Stadium's selection over Sun Life Stadium generated controversy as the league requested a roof to be added to Sun Life Stadium in order to be considered for future Super Bowls. There have been a few instances where the league has rescinded the Super Bowl from cities. Super Bowl XXVII in 1993 was originally awarded to Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, Arizona, but after Arizona voters elected not to recognize Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a paid state employees' holiday in 1990, the NFL moved the game to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. When voters in Arizona opted to create such a legal holiday in 1992, Super Bowl XXX in 1996 was awarded to Tempe. Super Bowl XXXIII was awarded first to Candlestick Park in San Francisco, but when plans to renovate the stadium fell through, the game was moved to Pro Player Stadium in Greater Miami. Super Bowl XXXVII was awarded to a new stadium not yet built in San Francisco. When that stadium failed to be built, the game was moved to Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego. Super Bowl XLIV, slated for February 7, 2010, was withdrawn from New York City's proposed West Side Stadium, because the city, state, and proposed tenants could not agree on funding. Super Bowl XLIV was then eventually awarded to Sun Life Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. Super Bowl XLIX in 2015 was originally given to Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri, but after 2 sales taxes failed to pass at the ballot box, and opposition by local business leaders and politicians increased, Kansas City eventually withdrew its request to host the game. Super Bowl XLIX was then eventually awarded to University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Selection process. The location of the Super Bowl is chosen at a meeting of all NFL team owners, usually 3 to 5 years before the event. The game has never been played in a metropolitan area that lacked an NFL franchise at the time the game was played, although in 2007 NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell suggested that a Super Bowl might be played in London, perhaps at Wembley Stadium. Through Super Bowl LVI, teams were allowed to bid for the rights to host Super Bowls, where cities submitted proposals to host a Super Bowl and were evaluated in terms of stadium renovation and their ability to host, but this competition was rescinded. In 2018, the league has made all decisions regarding hosting sites from Super Bowl LVII onward. The league chose a potential venue unilaterally, the chosen team put together a hosting proposal, and the league voted upon it to determine if it is acceptable. In 2014, a document listing the specific requirements of Super Bowl hosts was leaked, giving a clear list of what was required for a Super Bowl host. Some of the host requirements include: the host stadium must be in a market that hosts an NFL team and must have a minimum of 70,000 seats, with the media and electrical amenities necessary to produce the Super Bowl. Stadiums may include temporary seating for Super Bowls, but seating must be approved by the league. Stadiums where the average game day temperature is below 50 degrees Fahrenheit must either have a roof or a waiver given by the league. There must be a minimum of 35,000 parking spaces within 1 mile of the stadium. The host stadium must have space for the game day experience, a large pre-game entertainment area, within walking distance of the stadium. The host city must have space for the NFL experience, the interactive football theme park which is operated the week before the Super Bowl. An indoor venue for the event must have a minimum of 850,000 square feet, and an outdoor venue must have a minimum of 1 million square feet. Additionally, there must be space nearby for the media center, and space for all other events involved in the Super Bowl week, including golf courses and bowling alleys. The necessary infrastructure must be in place around the stadium and other Super Bowl facilities, including parking, security, electrical needs, media needs, communication needs, and transportation needs. There must be a minimum number of hotel spaces within 1 hour's drive of the stadium equaling 35% of the stadium's capacity, along with hotels for the teams, officials, media, and other dignitaries. There must be practice space of equal and comparable quality for both teams within a 20-minute drive of the team hotels, and rehearsal space for all events within a reasonable distance to the stadium. The practice facilities must have 1 grass field and at least 1 field of the same surface as the host stadium. The stadium must have a minimum of 70,000 fixed seats, including club and fixed suite seating, during regular season operations. Much of the cost of a Super Bowl is to be assumed by the host community, although some costs are enumerated within the requirements to be assumed by the NFL. New Orleans, the site of Super Bowl LXI in 2013, invested more than $1 billion in infrastructure improvements in the years leading up to the game. The NFL finds backup stadiums for the Super Bowl every year, in the event of a last-minute relocation of the game. Home team designation. The designated home team alternates between the NFC team in odd-numbered games and the AFC team in even-numbered games. This alternation was initiated with the first Super Bowl, when the Packers were the designated home team. Regardless of being the home or away team of record, each team has their team logo and wordmark painted in one of the end zones. Designated away teams have won 31 of 56 Super Bowls to date. Since Super Bowl XIII in 1979, the home team is given the choice of wearing their colored or white jerseys. Originally, the designated home team had to wear their colored jerseys, which resulted in the Cowboys donning their less exposed dark blue jerseys for Super Bowl V. While most of the home teams in the Super Bowl have chosen to wear their colored jerseys, there have been 7 exceptions: the Cowboys during Super Bowls XIII and XXVII, the Washington Redskins during Super Bowl XVII, the Steelers during Super Bowl XL, the Broncos during Super Bowl 50, the Patriots in Super Bowl LE, and the Buccaneers in Super Bowl LV. The Cowboys, since 1964, have worn white jerseys at home. The Washington Redskins wore white at home under coach Joe Gibbs starting in 1981 through 1992, continued by Richie Pettibon and Norv Turner through 2000, then again when Gibbs returned from 2004 through 2007. Meanwhile, the Steelers, who have always worn their black jerseys at home since the AFL-NFL merger in 1970, opted for the white jerseys after winning 3 consecutive playoff games on the road, wearing white. The Steelers' decision was compared with the Patriots in Super Bowl XX. The Patriots had worn white jerseys at home during the 1985 season, but after winning road playoff games against the Jets and Dolphins wearing red jerseys, New England opted to switch to scarlet for the Super Bowl as the designated home team. For the Broncos in Super Bowl 50, Denver general manager John Elway simply stated, "We've had Super Bowl success in our white uniforms." They previously had been 0-4 in Super Bowls when wearing their orange jerseys. The Broncos' decision is also perceived to be made out of superstition, losing all Super Bowl games with the orange jerseys in terrible fashion. It is unclear why the Patriots chose to wear their white jerseys for Super Bowl LI. During the pairing of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, New England has mostly worn their blue jerseys for home games, but have worn white for a home game in the 2008, 2010, and 2011 seasons. The Patriots were 3-0 in their white uniforms in Super Bowls before Super Bowl LI with Belichick and Brady, and they may have been going on recent trends of teams who wear white for the Super Bowl game. For Super Bowl LV, when the Buccaneers became the first team to reach the Super Bowl that their own stadium hosted, the Bucs coincidentally were designated the home team as per AFC-NFC rotation and elected to wear their white jerseys, having previously won both their divisional and championship postseason games on the road in white jerseys. White shirt teams have won 36 of 56 Super Bowls to date. The only teams to win in their dark-colored uniform in more recent years are the Packers against the Steelers in Super Bowl XLV, the Eagles against the Patriots in Super Bowl LI, and the Chiefs against the 49ers in Super Bowl LIV, with teams in white winning 12 of the last 13 Super Bowls. The 49ers, as part of the league's 75th anniversary celebration, used their 1955 throwback uniform in Super Bowl XXIX, which for that year was their regular home jersey. The Los Angeles Rams in Super Bowl LII wore their royal blue and yellow uniforms, which was a throwback uniform but then turned into their primary colors over the navy blue and metallic gold uniform, which they have previously worn for 6 home games including a home playoff game. No team has yet worn a third jersey or color rush uniform for the Super Bowl. The 49ers reportedly requested to wear an all-white third jersey ensemble for Super Bowl LIV, which the San Francisco Chronicle noted they could do with special permission from the league. The league never granted such permission, and the 49ers instead opted for their standard uniform of white jerseys with gold pants. Host cities/regions. 15 different regions have hosted Super Bowls. Note: years listed are the year the game was actually played rather than what NFL season it is considered to have been. Host stadiums. A total of 27 different stadiums, 7 of which have been since demolished, either have hosted or are scheduled to host Super Bowls. The years listed in the table below are the years the game was actually played rather than the NFL season it concluded. Stadium has since been demolished. Miami Gardens became a city in 2003. Prior to this, the stadium had a Miami address in unincorporated Miami-Dade County. The original Stanford Stadium, which hosted Super Bowl XIX, was demolished and a new stadium constructed on the site in 2006. Future Super Bowls, also denoted by italics. Future venues. The Super Bowl has not yet been played in any region that lacked an NFL or AFL franchise at the time the game was played. San Diego is the only metropolitan area as of 2021 that has hosted past Super Bowls, but does not currently have an NFL franchise. San Diego Stadium hosted 3 Super Bowls before their NFL franchise relocated to Los Angeles. Also, London, England, has occasionally been mentioned as a host city for a Super Bowl in the near future. Wembley Stadium has hosted several NFL games as part of the NFL International Series and is specifically designed for large, individual events, and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has openly discussed the possibility on different occasions. Time zone complications are a significant obstacle to a Super Bowl in London. A typical 6:30 p.m. EST start would result in the game beginning at 11:30 p.m. local time in London, this in an unusually late hour to be holding spectator sports, while the NFL has never in its history started a game later than 9:15 p.m. local time. Although bids have been submitted for all Super Bowls through Super Bowl LIX, the soonest that any stadium outside the NFL's footprint could serve as host would be Super Bowl LX in 2026. 8 stadiums that hosted at least one Super Bowl no longer exist. Tulane Stadium, on the Tulane University campus, which hosted 3 Super Bowls, was demolished in November 1979. Tampa Stadium, which hosted 2 Super Bowls, was demolished in April 1999. Stanford Stadium, which hosted 1 Super Bowl, was demolished and redeveloped in 2005-06. The Orange Bowl, which hosted 5 Super Bowls, was demolished in May 2008. The Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in Minneapolis, which hosted 1 Super Bowl, was demolished in March 2014. The Georgia Dome in Atlanta, which hosted 2 Super Bowls, was demolished in November 2017. The Pontiac Silverdome in suburban Detroit, which hosted 1 Super Bowl, was demolished in March 2018. San Diego Stadium, which hosted 3 Super Bowls, closed in March 2020 and was demolished in early 2021. Super Bowl trademark. The NFL very actively seeks to prevent what it calls unauthorized commercial use of its trademarked terms NFL, Super Bowl, and Super Bowl Sunday. As a result, many events and promotions tied to the game, but not sanctioned by the NFL, are asked to refer to it with euphemisms such as the big game, or other generic descriptions. A radio spot for Planters Nuts parroted this, by saying it would be super, to have a bowl, of Planters Nuts while watching the big game, and comedian Stephen Colbert began referring to the game in 2014 as the Superb Owl. In 2015, the NFL filed opposition with the USPTO Trademark Trial and Appeal Board to a trademark application submitted by an Arizona-based nonprofit for Superb Owl. The NFL claims that the use of the phrase Super Bowl implies an NFL affiliation, and on this basis the league asserts broad rights to restrict how the game may be shown publicly. For example, the league says Super Bowl showings are prohibited in churches or at other events that promote a message, while venues that do not regularly show sporting events cannot show the Super Bowl on any television screen larger than 55 inches. Some critics say the NFL is exaggerating its ownership rights by stating that any use is prohibited, as this contradicts the broad doctrine of fair use in the United States. Legislation was proposed by Utah Senator Orrin Hatch in 2008 to provide an exemption from exclusive rights in copyright for certain nonprofit organizations to display live football games, and for other purposes. In 2004, the NFL started issuing cease and desist letters to casinos in Las Vegas that were hosting Super Bowl parties. Super Bowl is a registered trademark, owned by the NFL, and any other business using that name for profit-making ventures is in violation of federal law, according to the letters. In reaction to the letters, many Vegas resorts, rather than discontinue the popular and lucrative parties, started referring to them as big game parties. In 2006, the NFL made an attempt to trademark the big game as well. However, it withdrew the application in 2007 due to growing commercial and public relations opposition to the move, mostly from Stanford University and the University of California, Berkeley, and their fans, as the Stanford Cardinal football and California Golden Bears football teams compete in the big game, which has been played since 1892. Additionally, the Mega Millions lottery game was known as the Big Game from 1996 to 2002.